man. I mean, it's been 2 weeks. Nobody's heard from her. There's been no trace of her. Like, it's...
Did you do something with her?
Kenia Monge was born on January 26, 1992 in Honduras. Kenia's mom, Maria, had her when she was only 15 years old. When Kenia was 1, her mother left Honduras to come to the U.S. Kenia stayed back with her grandmother. While she was living in Colorado, Maria met Tony Lee and fell in love. They got married and settled down in Aurora, Colorado, which is a suburb of Denver. It took 10 years for Kenia to be able to leave Honduras and be reunited with her mother and her new family. At 12 years old, Kenia was new in the U.S. and learning to speak English. While learning to speak the language, she asked her stepfather, Tony, for the words to define the relationship. Tony said, "I'm your stepfather and you're my stepdaughter." Kenia responded with, "No, you're my father and I'm your daughter." Kenia was also a big sister to her 2 half-siblings, Kim and Anthony. Her brother Anthony remembers her as being very happy and bringing everyone around her joy. She even taught Sunday school to little kids at their local church. She was beautiful, had a lot of friends, a boyfriend, and was just beginning her life. She had just graduated high school and enrolled in college with dreams of going into broadcasting. In March of 2011, Kenia was 19 years old, working as a customer service representative and living with her boyfriend. Lower downtown Denver is referred to as Lodo by locals. String lights glow along the streets, and it's a very popular place for both tourists and locals alike. It's known for its trendy shops, lounges, and restaurants. In 2011, the 24K Lounge was a Denver hotspot. On the evening of March 31st, Kenia and some of her friends who had fake IDs decided to go out. The group of girls she was heading out with that night was not her normal, close-knit group of friends. Kenia and her friends partied until the morning hours of April 1st. Around 12:30 a.m., a very intoxicated Kenia suddenly got up from the table and said she was going to the restroom. She left her keys, purse, and cell phone on the table. Kenia and another man had been dancing all that evening. They were both thrown out of the lounge for being too intoxicated. Kenia's friends were adamant that they had all had around the same amount of alcohol and that Kenia shouldn't have been so intoxicated. Kenia's family, however, believes that her drink may have been spiked with something. They all agreed that Kenia was acting completely out of character that night, and other women had come forward to report that they had had similar experiences at that lounge. After Kenia and the man were ejected from the bar, they stumbled down the street to the Lofts apartment complex on 1555 California Street. Surveillance cameras captured Kenia and the man entering the lobby. This footage shows the last hours of Kenia's life. A visibly intoxicated Kenia is seen walking into the building after 2 a.m. and then entering the elevator to head up to the man's apartment. The man later admitted to investigators that he tried to convince Kenia to come up to his apartment with him, but she ended up changing her mind and returning to the lobby. The footage shows that as the elevator doors are closing, she exits the elevators and heads back into the lobby. She is then seen talking to some men that had been fighting in the main area earlier. She attempted to break up their fight and held a brief conversation with them before stumbling away to find a restroom in a nearby hotel. One of the most tragic parts of this night is that Kenia came into contact with several people after she left the club. There were multiple chances for someone to offer to help her in her obvious drunken state, or for events to take a different turn than what they did. Cameras then capture her returning to the lobby and starting up a conversation with another man for several minutes before removing her red heels and heading out into the night. The last known sighting of Kenia Monge after she left the apartment lobby was out on the street where she stopped briefly to talk to a homeless man. Tragically, unbeknownst to Kenia, she was moments away from crossing paths with a psychopath. The next day, April 1st, was April Fool's Day. When no one had heard from Kenia, they began to worry. Kenia's father, Tony, received a call from Maria saying that Kenia was missing. He thought it was a bad joke. Kenia's friends came over to the house to return her belongings. At first, they were reluctant to tell Tony and Maria what they had been doing the night before because they were all underage. Tony was angry at first because he had no idea that Kenia was going out to clubs and using fake IDs. As Tony scrolled through the messages on Kenia's phone looking for any clue about what could have happened, a text came through from an unknown number. The text read, "Hey, this is Travis, the guy who gave you a ride last night. White creepy van. Did you make it home okay?" Tony and Maria called the Denver PD and reported Kenia missing, but it was too early for Kenia to be officially declared a missing person. They gave the police the cell number that had sent the suspicious text. The next day, police identified the owner of the cell phone as 31-year-old Travis Forbes at 387 Emerson Street. Meanwhile, Tony decided he wanted some answers. Tony called Travis's cell and left a message. Travis eventually called him back. He told Tony that the last time he saw Kenia was when he dropped her off at a Conoco on Spear Boulevard. Tony asked him to meet at the gas station, and he agreed. Travis brought a friend with him named Edward Fajardo. When he arrived, Tony was surprised to see 2 Denver PD officers already there. Kenia's mother, Maria, was worried that something would happen, so she called to have the police monitor the situation. Tony has spoken many times about the first time he shook Travis Forbes' hand. Whether it was father's intuition or something else, he just knew. The first thing he noticed was that his hand was shaking uncontrollably. This was the first time that Travis would give his version of events. He stated that he drove by the Hyatt Regency Hotel that night and saw Kenia stumbling around talking to the homeless man. Travis pulled his van over, got out, and offered to help her. He then stated that he took a very intoxicated Kenia to Club Lavish on Market Street to get her car, but they couldn't find it. He then allegedly offered to drive her home because her boyfriend's house was located near the bakery where he worked. He claimed that on the way home, Kenia wanted some cigarettes, so they stopped at a Conoco on Spear Boulevard and Pennsylvania Street. He said that when he got there, they realized that it was closed, and Kenia got out of the car and went up to a man that he could only identify as Dan. Kenia allegedly walked up to Dan, bummed a cigarette off of him, linked arms, and began speaking Spanish to him. According to Travis, Kenia walked off with Dan, and that was the last time he ever saw her. Tony stated that he was immediately suspicious of Travis's story and that you could clearly see that the Conoco was closed from across the river. Travis became really emotional when he was speaking to Tony and the officers. He stated, "I wish I knew more about what happened to your daughter, but I've told you everything I know." During the meeting, one of the officers asked to look inside of Travis's van. The officer noted that the van was extremely clean and that the rug in the back appeared to be brand new. He also noted that there was an overwhelming smell of bleach. Travis also had an alibi for that night. He claimed that after he left the Conoco, he went to his girlfriend Carrie's house and spent the night. Missing flyers went out, and investigators, along with Kenia's family and friends, searched desperately to find her. The beautiful 19-year-old's disappearance quickly became national news. On April 5th, the case was assigned to Detective Nash Gruhl, a 20-year veteran with the Denver PD. Detectives asked Travis and his girlfriend Carrie Humphreys to come down to the station for a recorded interview. Police had learned that Travis had a long criminal record for assault, trespassing, harassment, and theft. At 17, Travis was breaking into homes and businesses in Fort Collins, stealing more than $15,000 worth of money and merchandise. When authorities searched his room, they found women's underpants with initials on them. While still on probation, Forbes was arrested for criminal harassment in 1998. 1 year later, he was in trouble again for carrying a knife while on probation, and he violated his curfew 43 times. He was then sent to community corrections. In 2004, 2 women joggers in Highlands Ranch were hit by rocks thrown by Forbes. One of the joggers was struck in the head and said that when she confronted Travis, he screamed obscenities at her. He was arrested and charged with assault. He pled guilty to a lesser charge of harassment involving physical force and only spent 1 month in jail. At the station, Travis told detectives the same story that he had told Kenia's father. Detective Gruhl later stated, "I didn't believe him. I just had a weird feeling about him. I felt that he was lying." Travis's girlfriend, Carrie Humphrey, backed up his alibi and told police that Travis came over to her house that night around 3 a.m. and stayed until 8 that morning. Travis readily admitted to investigators that he was the last person to see Kenia alive, but without having anything solid, they had no choice but to let him go. Meanwhile, on the very same day, the owner of Debbie's Bakery, where Travis worked, called police and reported that she was missing a white Igloo cooler. She also told police that a new fire extinguisher she had just purchased now seemed to have a broken gauge. On April 6th, investigators reviewed Travis's cell phone records and discovered that Travis's phone was not pinging anywhere near his girlfriend's house on April 1st. In fact, his records revealed that he was miles away in Keensburg, Colorado. Keensburg is in Weld County and is 42 miles east of Denver. It's a very small town with a population that barely spikes over 1,000 residents. Investigators headed out there to see if they could find any sign of Kenia. During their investigation, they went out to Keensburg more than 10 times, looking in ditches, waterways, and farms. Detectives also interviewed some of Travis's ex-girlfriends who revealed that Travis enjoyed inflicting pain on others. On April 16th, Travis was spotted on surveillance video at a gas station in Hudson, Colorado, which is only a few miles away from Keensburg. Investigators wondered if he had gone out there to check on what he had done with Kenia. Travis's relationship with Carrie Humphrey abruptly ended not too long after their interview. He took her SUV and headed south to Austin, Texas. Travis's sudden departure from Denver made detectives look at him even harder. They executed a search warrant on Debbie's Bakery, where Travis had been employed. Travis was trying his luck at becoming an entrepreneur and had developed his own line of gluten-free granola bars called 4Bs. Detective Gruhl recalled that both Travis's van and the cooler in the bakery had an overwhelmingly powerful smell of bleach. Investigators also learned that there were several times that Travis stayed all night in the bakery, and his online history showed that he was looking at sites of missing women. They then decided to look at the bakery's surveillance footage. Around 7 p.m., not long after Travis sent the text to Kenia's phone, he is seen wheeling a cooler into the bakery and putting it in the freezer. He takes the carpet out of the back of his delivery van and is carrying around a bottle of bleach. At 7:22, wearing yellow gloves up to his elbows, he walks over and disables the cameras. Another man who was leaving his nearby business at 8:30 p.m. witnessed Travis burning items in a 55-gallon drum. The heat was so hot that it bubbled the paint outside the business and melted the asphalt. On April 26th, detectives showed up to Travis's now ex-girlfriend's work and asked her to follow them to the station for a second interview. At first, Humphrey stuck to her original story that Travis had been at her house from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. on April 1st. Investigators confronted Carrie with Travis's cell phone records, and she finally admitted the truth, that Travis had not been with her that night and that he had asked her to lie for him. While Travis was in Austin, Texas, he gave an interview to a local TV station. In this interview, he bizarrely and infamously nods his head yes while denying any involvement in Kenia's disappearance. At one point, he even pretends to forget Kenia's name.
The truth is all we have. I mean, it's been 2 weeks, nobody's heard from her. There's been no trace of her. It's surreal. I don't even know what to think of it.
Since you're a person of interest, let me ask you this. Did you do something with her?
No.
Did you kidnap her?
No.
Did you assault her?
I did not.
Did you murder her?
I did not. No. No, and having that on you, having that energy on you is very stressful. Sorry that I was indifferent, that I didn't think anything. I didn't think anything. I didn't think she was gonna disappear. What's her name?
Kenia.
Kenia, yeah.
On May 4th, 2011, a team of U.S. Marshals and Austin police officers arrested Travis on a felony aggravated car theft warrant for taking his ex-girlfriend's vehicle to Texas. Detective Gruhl boarded a plane and headed south to talk to him.
How you doing, Travis?
The detective recalled that Travis seemed shocked to see him.
You know what? They sent me to Texas because they think you're running to Mexico.
Oh, what the f*** are you doing in Mexico? And
Get a tan? I want to get your story, okay? But
You got my story.
well, we actually got other stuff.
Investigators tell him that when CSI processed his delivery van, they found a hair that they believe to be Kenia's.
That's how they find that girl. I'm surprised you guys haven't charged me with it.
He also expressed regret for himself.
Hindsight, yes. There are many things I regret. I regret picking that girl up. I regret that very much so. She me over. My life got turned inside out from that night.
We found hair in the back of your van. And if you had sex with her, so be it. But dude, not saying that and finding out later that you did, that's not going to look good.
Dude, none of this looks good. I'm in Texas. I
So
think...
did she have with you?
Nash, I think at this point, my lawyer should be present. I should not be saying another word.
Travis refused to change his story. However, armed with a warrant for his DNA, Travis had no choice but to hand it over. Despite being interrogated by detectives for more than 3 hours, they were no closer to finding Kenia. Travis was extradited back to Colorado. Unfortunately, his ex-girlfriend dropped the charges and now claimed that she loaned her vehicle to Travis. Travis was released from the Jefferson County Jail on June 30th. Travis Forbes was free to walk the streets of Colorado once again. After Travis's release, Detective Gruhl had Travis followed for the next 2 days. Travis headed 1 hour north to Fort Collins, Colorado. On July 1st, a report of a suspicious man came into the Fort Collins PD. Even though Travis had just been released from jail, he didn't waste any time. He now had a compulsion and was actively looking for his next victim. 31-year-old Lydia Tillman had just moved back to Colorado from New York City in March of 2011 to care for her father. She was getting acclimated to her new home and didn't have a lot of friends yet. Lydia attended a fireworks show in a nearby park. Seeing the fireworks display is one of the last things she remembers about that night. After the show was over, she walked back through the quiet, dark streets to her apartment at the 1200 block of Pomona Street. Unbeknownst to Lydia, a man was following not too far behind. At 5:30 a.m. on July 5th, a 911 call came in reporting an apartment on fire. When emergency responders arrived, they saw Lydia laying unconscious in her yard and her apartment engulfed in flames. Lydia was rushed to the hospital and was unable to tell police what had happened due to the severity of her injuries. At the hospital, they discovered that Lydia had been brutally assaulted. When she briefly came to, she saw her apartment was on fire. In a miraculous attempt to save her own life, she had regained consciousness long enough to drag herself to her second-story window and jump out onto the concrete below. Due to the severity of her injuries, Lydia was unrecognizable to her family except for her tattoo. She suffered a massive stroke and was placed in a medically induced coma for the next 5 weeks. While Lydia was in a coma, investigators were able to collect some DNA evidence left by her attacker. Fort Collins detective Jacqueline Shackley was assigned to Lydia's case. She was advised of the July 1st call to Fort Collins PD regarding the suspicious man and wondered if it was connected to Lydia's attack. When she began to investigate the connection, Denver investigators advised her that he was a suspect in an open homicide case. Detective Shackley called Detective Gruhl to discuss the cases, and they realized that in both cases, the assailant had tried to clean up any trace of the crime with bleach and had used fire to destroy evidence. Even though the crimes seemed to have the same MO and Travis was known to have been in the Fort Collins area at that time, they decided they needed even more on Travis. On Friday, July 8, 2011, 37-year-old Amy Ahonen was running errands and preparing for her 38th birthday the next day. Amy was divorced and had moved to Golden, Colorado 5 years earlier. She was scheduled to work her regular shift at Red Lobster at 6 p.m. that night. Her roommate, Kim McDaniel, remembers last seeing Amy around 1 p.m. A call came in to the Colorado State Patrol reporting a Jeep on the side of the road on Highway 6 west of the I-70 interchange. The Colorado State Patrol had already received a call from Amy herself earlier that night. She had called 911 asking for help with her vehicle. When the trooper arrived, however, Amy told him that she no longer needed their help. Amy's interaction with the state trooper is the last time anyone ever saw Amy Ahonen. Police in Fort Collins were closely watching Travis Forbes late Saturday night into the early morning hours of Sunday, July 10th. They were following him to bars in the Old Town section of Fort Collins. They watched Travis park his bike and stash his backpack. At 2 a.m., officers watched as the bars closed and let out, and Travis walked over to a hot dog stand and started juggling glowing balls. Multiple women walked out of the bars, saw Travis, and started talking to him. One of the women spoke to him for over 30 minutes. Police looked on as they started walking away from the bars and headed away from the crowds towards a residential area. After a couple of blocks, officers approached them and began questioning them separately. Travis lied and told officers that his name was Travis Kennedy. After officers left, Forbes then returned to his bike, changed his clothes, and began following yet another visibly intoxicated woman as she wandered towards the nearby dark neighborhood streets. Alarmed that Travis was out of control and that she was in imminent danger, officers could no longer wait to take him in. They arrested him on a false reporting charge for giving the officer a fake name. He was booked into the Larimer County Jail. Investigators knew they had to work fast to get enough information to charge him in Kenia Monge's disappearance or the assault of Lydia Tillman. While Travis was being held in Larimer County, tensions were high. It was now a race against time, and the stakes were high. Travis was due to bond out of jail, and the CBI worked diligently all night testing the DNA samples collected from Lydia Tillman and comparing them to the DNA sample collected from Travis. Just minutes before Travis was about to get out of jail, the lab results came back. The DNA samples were a match. Just before 11 p.m. on Monday, July 11th, Travis was charged with suspicion of attempted murder and the assault on Lydia Tillman. On August 23rd, detectives sat down with Travis as he had decided to come clean about Kenia in exchange for having the death penalty taken off the table. He told detectives that after Kenia had gotten in his van that night, she had passed out and he assaulted her. During the assault, Kenia woke up and began to fight back. Travis became enraged and killed her. After killing her, he put her in the cooler seen on the bakery surveillance tapes, and the next day he drove around and made his granola bar deliveries as normal. After going to the bakery, cleaning up the evidence, and burning her belongings, he drove her out to Keensburg, where he buried her under some cottonwood trees.
I wanted to bury her either next to some water or next to some trees.
Why is that?
Because that's where I would like to be buried. If somebody had killed me, I would hope that they would bury me next to something nice. I just dumped me in some dumpster.
So you find this spot. Why did you pick there?
Because of the trees.
Okay. And how long do you think you dug for?
It wasn't very long. I was actually surprised. I was worried that it was so late that I wouldn't have enough time.
Okay.
But I dug that hole fast.
Were you actually inside the hole?
Yeah.
And that's why you were able to tell me that it went shoulder depth.
I left my credit card inside the hole.
Why did you do that?
It's not that I wanted to get caught. And it wasn't like I was trying to brag that I did it. Because I knew that if it was ever going to be found, holy shit, I'd bought a credit card. And those credit cards have embroidered lettering on them. I just figured it was right.
After Travis's confession on September 7th, investigators brought Travis with them to recover Kenia's body. When they arrived, Detective Grohl got out of the vehicle and walked towards the area that Travis had directed them to. He came to a stop and Travis screamed out a loud, animalistic scream. He then told Detective Grohl that he was standing directly on top of her grave. Investigators set up a tent, started digging up the area, and found the remains of Kenia Monge right where Travis said they would be. Kenia's father, Tony Lee, had to deliver the news to Maria and their other 2 children, ending any hope they had for Kenia's safe return. The autopsy results showed that the decomposition was too advanced to determine a clear cause of death. Travis's ex-girlfriend, Carrie Humphrey, was arrested and charged with attempting to influence a public servant, false reporting to authorities, and perjury. She pled guilty and was sentenced to 2 months in prison, followed by 4 years of supervised probation. Prosecutor Carrie Lombardi stated that during the investigation regarding Kenia's disappearance, Carrie acted smug and giggled throughout the interviews. On September 26th, Travis pled guilty to Kenia's murder and was sentenced to life without parole. Travis's parents shook hands with Tony and Maria and apologized for what Travis had done. On October 21st, Lydia finally got to confront her attacker face to face. Still recovering from her severe injuries, she was unable to read her statement, so her father read it for her. Lydia told Travis that he didn't do anything to her and that she forgave him. She later said that it was too hard to live her life with that much hate. Travis was sentenced to another 48 years for Lydia's attack. Travis wept, no doubt for himself, throughout the court proceedings. Kenia's mother gave Lydia one of Kenia's rings and later said that when she hugged Lydia, it felt like she was getting to embrace Kenia for that moment. On November 27, 2013, someone walking a trail in Wheat Ridge, Colorado found a bone and turned it into police. Someone in nearby Adams County also found a bone and turned it into police. Both departments completed DNA tests on the bones and found that they were in fact the remains of Amy Ahonen. Unfortunately, there is not enough evidence to determine the cause of death or even rule it as a homicide. Many people wonder if Travis Forbes stopped to help Amy as a good Samaritan and if he is connected to her disappearance. Kenia's family has tried to carry on in the wake of her absence over the past 10 years. They started a foundation to educate women on staying safe from predators. Despite the fact that Lydia Tillman has permanent damage from what Travis Forbes did to her, she's an inspiration to many survivors. She's a fighter, and she's the epitome of bravery and strength. Here's Lydia 4 years later describing in her own words what she went through that horrible night.
Hi. I'm Lydia Tillman, and thank you for being here. My speech is a little slow sometimes, but I like to say deliberate. I want to dedicate this speech to Sue Webster and Kenia memories. Both are not here anymore. This is July 5th, 2011. I was totally incapacitated. I couldn't move, speak, think, eat, breathe. And you see still a little flames. A stranger followed me home. I was walking home from the fireworks in Fort Collins, and he, as far as we can piece together, pushed me into my home. I can't talk about much about the actual night because I don't remember anything. Often when people have strokes, they don't remember before or after. I think that is the case in my case, but also that and the sheer amount of trauma I experienced in one night was just too much for my brain to handle. What followed was a brutal attack. He tried to kill me. The only reason why he didn't is because of my strength and will. I think when he set this fire, I think he thought I was dead. So, somehow I came to enough to jump out of the second-story window onto concrete. Splat. I was saving myself, my life. This is before the stroke. But he strangled me enough to cause my carotid artery to dissect, causing a clot to form. Later, right after this, I had a massive stroke. Even though I don't remember jumping out of the window, I know love saved my life. That and ovaries of steel. But mostly love. Love of myself. Love of this life.
If you liked this video, please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you'll be notified of our upcoming documentaries. Join our Patreon for True Crime and Wine Wednesdays, exclusive content, and interviews. The link is in the description below.